Beloved, I come before you today with a word of encouragement, a word of hope, and a reminder that no matter the hurt you have endured, God is fully aware of your pain, and he will deal with those who hurt you, even if they are those closest to you, even if they are family. Let me begin by reminding you that God is sovereign. There is nothing that happens in your life that escapes his attention. He sees every tear, hears every cry, and understands every wound. In the midst of betrayal, rejection, or hurt, it may seem as if the world has turned against you. But understand this: God is not blind to your circumstances. He is not ignorant of your suffering. God is working even when you cannot see it. And his justice is not like the justice of man. It is perfect, and it will be executed in his time, not yours. Forgiveness, my friends, is not an endorsement of wrong. When you forgive, you do not say that what was done to you is acceptable. You simply release the power of bitterness over your life. In forgiving, you allow God to step in and deal with the matter, for he alone knows how to bring true justice. It is not easy, but forgiveness is the key to your healing. The act of letting go is the first step toward restoration. I know the pain of betrayal runs deep, especially when it comes from those we love, family, those we have trusted the most. Yet we must understand that God can heal the deepest of wounds. No matter how hurt you feel, no matter how impossible it seems, God has the power to restore what has been broken. His ability to mend what has been torn is beyond our comprehension. And here is the most important truth: you are not responsible for the actions of others. You cannot control how people act, how they treat you, or how they respond. But you are responsible for your own heart, your own actions, and your own response. When you let go of trying to control everything and surrender the matter to God, he will step in. Trust him. He will not leave you in your hurt. He will not abandon you in your struggle. He will work all things together for your good, even when you can't see how it will come together. So, as you face the pain of betrayal and hurt, especially from those who should love and support you, remember, God will deal with them, but even more importantly, he will deal with you. He will bring you healing. He will bring you peace. He will restore your soul. And through this process, you will find strength, resilience, and a deeper understanding of his love for you. I leave you with this. When you release the burden of revenge, when you release the burden of revenge, when you release the burden of revenge, God's sovereignty is the foundational truth that should anchor every believer's faith and perspective. It means that God is in complete control of everything in the universe. And there is nothing that happens outside of his will or his knowledge. His sovereignty encompasses every detail of life, from the grandest moments to the smallest occurrences. Nothing catches God by surprise, and nothing is outside his reach or power. This is the reality that we, as his children, must lean on, especially when faced with betrayal, hurt, or injustice, whether it comes from strangers or more painfully from those closest to us. Family. In times of difficulty, it's easy to feel as though we are lost in a chaotic world where nothing makes sense. where the pain of betrayal and abandonment feels overwhelming. But when we understand that God is sovereign, we begin to realize that He is neither absent nor indifferent. He is fully aware of what is happening in our lives, and He is actively working in ways we cannot always perceive. His plan for us is far greater than any hurt or setback we might face. In fact, He is not only aware of the wrongs done to us, but He will also use even those painful experiences for a greater purpose, to strengthen our character, to deepen our trust in Him, and to ultimately bring about His good and perfect will in our lives. God's sovereignty doesn't mean that He causes every hurt or injustice, but it does mean that He allows them within the framework of His ultimate purpose. No matter how difficult the situation or how painful the wound, we must remember that God has a purpose for it. He doesn't waste any of our suffering, and He promises that He will work all things together for our good, even when we don't understand how that could possibly be true. When we acknowledge that God is sovereign, we also acknowledge that He is the final judge. We do not have to take matters into our own hands, seeking revenge or trying to control the actions of others. God will deal with those who hurt us in His time and in His way. His justice is perfect, unlike human justice, which is often flawed, partial, or delayed. God's justice is always right. And He will make sure that every wrong is dealt with according to His righteous standard. This gives us peace, knowing that we don't have to carry the burden of judgment. That is God's role, not ours. The sovereignty of God gives us hope even in our darkest moments. It assures us that no matter how dire our circumstances may seem, God is still on the throne. He has not lost control, and He will not abandon us. His plans for our lives are unshakable, and no amount of hurt, betrayal, or opposition can thwart His purposes. Even when we can't see it, God is at work, weaving together every part of our lives for His glory and our good. The sovereignty of God is what allows us to trust in His timing. It's what helps us understand that God is not bound by the limitations of human experience. While we might want immediate resolution to our pain or quick retribution against those who have wronged us, we must learn to wait on God's perfect timing. His ways are higher than our ways, and His thoughts are higher than our thoughts. We must trust that He knows what is best and that His plan will unfold exactly as it should. In the midst of the trials and the hurts we face, we can stand firm knowing that God is sovereign. He sees, He knows, and He will act in His time. Our role is to trust Him, lean on His promises, and allow Him to carry us through, for He is in control and He will never leave us nor forsake us. Is one of the most powerful and transformative principles in the life of a believer. Yet it is also one of the most misunderstood and often the hardest to practice, especially when the wounds inflicted upon us come from those closest to us, family, friends, or people we love. The importance of forgiveness lies not in excusing the actions of others or pretending that the hurt did not occur, but in releasing ourselves from the hold that anger, bitterness, and resentment can have on our hearts. When we hold on to unforgiveness, we allow the pain caused by others to continue to control our emotions, thoughts, and even our actions. Unforgiveness is like a weight that we carry with us every day, slowing us down, robbing us of peace, and keeping us from experiencing the fullness of life that God intends for us. It is not the person who wronged us who suffers most when we refuse to forgive. It is us. We are the ones who carry the emotional scars, the lingering bitterness, and the constant reminder of the hurt. The more we nurse that pain, the more it festers and grows, eating away at our peace, our joy, and our relationship with God. It's not about minimizing the hurt or pretending that the offense was not significant. It is about releasing the right to exact revenge and trusting that God will handle the situation in His perfect justice. When we forgive, we stop holding on to the offense. We stop trying to pay back the person who hurt us. And we surrender the matter to God, allowing Him to bring about healing and resolution in His time and His way. It is not about saying the hurt was okay. It's about choosing to let go of the control that bitterness holds over us. It's also deeply connected to our own healing. It is difficult to move forward when we are still anchored in the past, continually rehashing the wrongs that have been done to us. But when we forgive, we begin to free ourselves from the emotional chains that bind us to our past. We stop letting our pain define who we are. Forgiveness opens the door to healing because it releases us from the cycle of anger and hurt that keeps us trapped in a constant state of emotional turmoil. Forgiveness is not a one-time decision, but a process. It's not as simple as saying the words, "I forgive you," and then moving on. Sometimes the pain runs so deep that we must make the choice to forgive repeatedly, over and over again, until our hearts are truly healed. Each time the memory of the offense rises up, we have the opportunity to choose forgiveness once more. It is a decision we make in the present, trusting that God will help us heal and restore the broken places in our hearts. Forgiveness is also essential for our relationship with God. In the Lord's Prayer, we are reminded that God forgives us in the same way we forgive others. When we refuse to forgive, we place a barrier between ourselves and God, because unforgiveness is an obstacle to the grace and love He desires to pour into our lives. We cannot fully experience God's forgiveness and grace if we are unwilling to extend the same grace to others. Our relationship with God is a reflection of how we treat others, and unforgiveness hinders that relationship. Forgiveness is a powerful testimony to the world around us. When we forgive, especially in situations where forgiveness seems impossible or undeserved, we reflect the heart of God to a watching world. It shows the world that we are different, that we don't hold grudges or seek revenge, but instead offer grace, just as God offers grace to us. It becomes a witness to the transformative power of God's love and forgiveness in our lives. In a world that is often marked by bitterness and division, forgiveness is a radical act of love that demonstrates the power of God to heal broken relationships and restore peace. Forgiveness brings freedom. It frees us from the prison of resentment and bitterness. It releases us from the grip of the past and allows us to walk in the freedom and peace that comes with trusting God to deal with the wrongs done to us. When we forgive, we stop allowing the actions of others to dictate our emotional state and our sense of well-being. We choose to live in the freedom that comes with knowing that God is our defender and He will take care of everything in His time. Forgiveness is not merely a suggestion or a nice ideal. It is a command from God that leads to healing, freedom, and peace. It is a gift we give not only to others, but to ourselves. freeing our hearts from the heavy burden of unforgiveness. And as we forgive, we align ourselves with the heart of God, reflecting his grace, mercy, and love to the world. The importance of forgiveness is immeasurable, for it not only restores broken relationships, but also brings healing to our own hearts, drawing us closer to God's transformative power. God's timing and justice are intricately connected, and understanding them is crucial for us as believers when we face the pain of betrayal, injustice, or hurt. We live in a world that often feels chaotic, where wrongs are committed and people seem to get away with it, where justice feels delayed or incomplete. We may wonder, why does God allow these things to happen? Why doesn't he act immediately? Where's the justice? It is in these moments of uncertainty and frustration that we must trust in the truth that God's timing and justice are perfect, even when they're not on our timeline or according to our understanding. One of the most challenging aspects of God's justice is that it often doesn't unfold the way we expect it to. As human beings, we want justice quickly. We want the wrongdoers to be held accountable immediately, often with a sense of urgency. But God's timing is not bound by our limited perspective. He sees the full picture, the beginning and the end, while we are only privy to the present moment. His justice is never rushed, yet it is never delayed. In his wisdom, he knows when the right time is to act. And he does so with perfect precision. In our pain and hurt, we may feel like justice is taking too long, or worse, that it may never come. We might even be tempted to take matters into our own hands, to retaliate or seek vengeance, believing that if we don't act, things will never be set right. But the truth is that when we choose to handle situations ourselves, we step out of alignment with God's plan. Our human understanding of justice is often incomplete or flawed, driven by emotions like anger or pride. God, however, is the perfect judge. And he knows exactly how to bring about true justice in a way that not only addresses the wrongdoing, but also upholds his greater purposes for our lives. God's justice is not just about punishing wrongdoing. It is about restoring what was broken and making things right in the truest sense. His justice is redemptive, bringing healing and wholeness to situations that seem irreparably damaged. He is not quick to bring down wrath. Rather, he is patient, desiring that all would come to repentance and that the hearts of his people would be healed. In his perfect justice, he balances both mercy and judgment, allowing for the opportunity of redemption while also ensuring that wrongs are addressed. God's timing is also deeply tied to his love and his desire to shape our hearts. Sometimes his justice is delayed not because he is unaware of what's happening, but because he's working in us. He's teaching us patience, endurance, and trust. He wants to deepen our faith and help us grow spiritually in the midst of our struggles. We might not see the reason for the wait, but God is preparing something far greater than we could imagine. Through our waiting, he is refining our character and building in us the strength to handle the blessings he has prepared for us in the future. Additionally, God's timing and justice are often a mystery to us because he operates outside of the boundaries of time that we understand. What may seem like a delay to us is merely a moment in God's eternal perspective. He is never late, nor is he early. He acts exactly when he knows the situation will bring the greatest glory to his name and the greatest good to our lives. We must learn to trust that even when we cannot understand the timing, God is still in control. His delays are not denials. He has a purpose for every season we walk through, and his timing is always aligned with that purpose. God's justice is a matter of trust. It is a choice to believe that he is a righteous judge, that he will always act in accordance with his goodness and love. When we trust God with his timing and justice, we surrender our need for control. We recognize that vengeance and retribution are not ours to seek. They belong to God alone. In the process, we experience peace because we know that no injustice goes unnoticed and no wrong goes unaddressed. Whether we see the outcome in this lifetime or not, we can rest assured that God will bring all things to account, and he will do so perfectly in his perfect time. So when you face the hardship of seeing those who hurt you seemingly go unpunished, remember, God is not asleep. His justice is coming, and his timing is flawless. In the meantime, we are called to trust him, trusting not only that he will act, but that he is also working within us, preparing us for what lies ahead. His justice will be done, and it will be done in a way that brings glory to his name and peace to our hearts. Healing from hurt is a profound and sometimes difficult journey, especially when the pain we experience comes from those closest to us. The wounds inflicted by family, friends, or loved ones often run deep, leaving scars that are not easily seen, but are felt in the heart and mind. These hurts can create emotional barriers that leave us feeling isolated, angry, confused, or even hopeless. Yet, it is essential to understand that healing is not only possible, but it is a process that leads us to a place of peace and restoration when we choose to allow God to guide us through it. The first step in healing from hurt is acknowledging the pain. Too often, we try to ignore or suppress the feelings of hurt, thinking that time will simply make them go away. But pain that is buried doesn't heal. It festers, and over time it can grow into bitterness, resentment, or even despair. Acknowledging the hurt allows us to face it, to deal with it honestly and openly, so that it no longer holds power over us. It's okay to admit that we're hurting, that we're struggling, and that the wound feels too deep to heal on our own. The first step toward healing is the willingness to be vulnerable before God, recognizing that we need his help to heal. Once we acknowledge the pain, forgiveness becomes the next crucial step. Forgiveness doesn't mean that the wrong was acceptable or that the person who hurt us shouldn't be held accountable. Forgiveness is a choice to release the burden of anger, resentment, and the desire for revenge that we carry. It's about letting go of the emotional weight that ties us to the past so that we can free ourselves to move forward. While forgiveness is often difficult, it is necessary for healing because it allows us to break free from the cycle of pain. Holding on to bitterness only prolongs our suffering, but choosing to forgive frees our hearts to experience God's peace. Forgiveness doesn't always mean immediate healing. Sometimes the emotional wounds are so deep that forgiveness alone is not enough. Healing often requires time, and it requires us to walk through the pain, allowing God to transform the hurt into something greater. It may require us to cry, to grieve, and to ask God for strength to endure the healing process. But we must trust that in God's hands, every hurt has the potential to be transformed into something beautiful. He is the ultimate healer, and his desire is to restore us, to take the broken pieces of our hearts and make us whole again. Another crucial aspect of healing is the understanding that God is with us through the entire process. It can be easy to feel abandoned or forgotten in the midst of pain, but the truth is that God is closer to us than we realize. especially when we are hurting. He is near, even in our darkest moments, when it feels like the hurt will never end. God is working behind the scenes, gently mending our hearts, providing us with comfort and strength, and reminding us that we are not alone. It is in those moments of hurt that we experience God's presence most powerfully as He pours His love and peace into our hearts. Part of healing also involves taking responsibility for our own hearts. While we cannot control the actions of others, we can control how we respond to them. We must choose to guard our hearts from the poison of unforgiveness, bitterness, and anger. This requires intentional effort, seeking God in prayer, filling our minds with His word, and allowing His truth to renew our thoughts and emotions. As we meditate on His promises, we begin to see our circumstances through a different lens, one that is shaped by His love and His perspective. Healing involves allowing God to transform our hearts, to replace our hurt with His peace, our anger with His love, and our despair with His hope. Healing is also a communal process. God created us for relationship, and part of healing involves opening ourselves to others, trusted friends, family, or a support group who can walk with us, listen to us, and pray with us. Isolation can make the healing process harder because it removes us from the support and encouragement we need. Healing is not a solitary journey, but one that is often best walked with others who care for us and are willing to help bear our burdens. God works through His people to bring comfort, encouragement, and strength during times of deep pain. Over time, as we allow God to heal us, we begin to see the fruits of that healing. We move from a place of hurt and brokenness to a place of wholeness and peace. The scars remain, but they no longer control us. Instead, they become a testament to the grace of God and the strength He has given us to overcome. Healing doesn't mean that the hurt is erased. It means that we are no longer defined by the hurt, but by God's love and His work in us. We find that we are stronger, wiser, and more compassionate, and that we can now help others who are walking through similar pain. Healing from hurt is a process that takes time, but it is one that leads to freedom, peace, and restoration. It requires us to acknowledge the pain, choose forgiveness, trust in God's presence and healing, and actively guard our hearts. As we walk through this journey, we can rest in the knowledge that God is faithful to complete the work He has started in us, and that no wound is beyond His ability to heal. We may not always understand why we experience pain, but we can trust that God will bring healing in His perfect timing, turning our sorrow into joy and our brokenness into something beautiful. God's power over relationships is one of the most profound and transformative aspects of His character. Relationships are the foundation of human existence, whether they are family bonds, friendships, or romantic partnerships. They shape our lives, our emotional well-being, and our sense of belonging. Yet, relationships are also some of the most challenging areas of life. We face misunderstandings, conflicts, disappointments, and betrayals. And often we wonder, how can God restore this brokenness? How can He heal the wounds caused by others, especially those we love? The truth is that God has complete power over all relationships, and He is more than capable of redeeming, restoring, and transforming even the most broken relationships. His power in our relationships goes beyond simply resolving conflicts or smoothing over disagreements. It extends to the very core of the heart, where healing begins. God is not limited by the dysfunctions, faults, or hurts that may characterize our relationships. His ability to bring change is unlimited because he sees beyond the surface. He knows the heart and he understands the deeper issues that need to be addressed. He can heal relationships that seem irreparable, and he can guide us through the process of reconciliation and restoration. And one of the most powerful ways God works in relationships is by transforming the hearts of those involved. Often conflict arises in relationships because of pride, unforgiveness, jealousy, or selfishness. These issues stem from the human heart and can cause deep wounds, but God has the power to change hearts. He can soften hardened hearts, break down barriers, and bring healing to even the most painful relational wounds. It begins with God working within us to change how we think, how we respond, and how we see others. When we allow God's love and grace to transform our hearts, it changes how we interact with those around us. We become more patient, more understanding, and more compassionate. God has the power to restore broken relationships. There may be times when relationships fracture beyond what seems repairable, when trust is broken, when betrayal has occurred, or when the wounds are too deep. In those moments, it may seem impossible that anything can be mended, but God specializes in restoration. He has the ability to heal what seems irreparably damaged. He does not overlook the pain or dismiss the hurt that has been caused, but he works patiently and powerfully to bring healing. Restoration is not always immediate, but God's timing and his methods are always perfect. He works to rebuild trust, to renew bonds, and to restore what was once lost. Through his power, broken relationships can be healed in ways that bring glory to him. Additionally, God's power over relationships extends to the way he can empower us to forgive and let go of past hurts. The healing of relationships often requires us to let go of resentment, bitterness, and anger. We cannot move forward in a relationship if we continue to hold on to the past. Forgiveness is one of the most difficult but essential acts in restoring relationships. Yet it is through the power of God that we are able to forgive. And on our own, we may feel justified in holding on to our anger, but God's grace gives us the strength to forgive even when it feels impossible. Forgiveness doesn't mean that the other person's actions are excused, but it means that we choose to release the emotional hold those actions have on us. In doing so, we open the door for God to work in the relationship and bring about healing. In addition to healing and forgiveness, God has the power to guide us in how we navigate relationships. He doesn't leave us to figure it all out on our own. Through prayer, wisdom from his word, and the guidance of the Holy Spirit, God provides us with the direction we need to build healthy, God-honoring relationships. Sometimes it may feel like we're walking through a relational minefield, unsure of how to proceed. But God promises to lead us. He can give us wisdom to know how to respond to conflict, how to show love when it's difficult, and how to protect ourselves while still maintaining healthy relationships. His power is available to guide us every step of the way. He also empowers us to love others as he loves us. In relationships, love is often tested, and it's easy to become discouraged when love feels unreciprocated or strained. But God's love is the model we are to follow. His love is unconditional, sacrificial, and patient. He doesn't love us based on our performance or our worthiness. He loves us because of who he is. And in the same way, we are called to love others with the same selfless love, even when it is challenging. God gives us the strength to love those who hurt us, to extend grace when others fall short, and to continue loving even in the midst of difficulty. Finally, God's power over relationships is most evident in the way he models reconciliation through Jesus Christ. Jesus came to reconcile humanity to God, bridging the gap caused by sin and restoring the relationship between God and his people. He modeled what true reconciliation looks like, not holding our sins against us, but offering forgiveness, grace, and mercy. Through his death on the cross, he showed us that reconciliation often comes at a great cost, but it is always worth it. As we follow his example, we are empowered to seek reconciliation in our relationships, knowing that God desires unity, peace, and healing in all our connections. In conclusion, God's power over relationships is immeasurable. He is able to heal, restore, guide, and empower us in every relationship we encounter. No matter how broken or painful a relationship may be, God has the ability to transform it. Whether it is a relationship with family, friends, or a spouse, God's power is at work to heal wounds, rebuild trust, and restore what was lost. Through his love and grace, he equips us to forgive, to love, and to navigate the complexities of human relationships. When we surrender our relationships to God, we invite his power to work in ways we could never achieve on our own. Through him, even the most broken relationships can be made whole again. Letting go of control is one of the most liberating and yet challenging decisions we can make in our lives. As human beings, we often have an innate desire to manage our circumstances, to orchestrate the events in our lives to align with our preferences and desires. We want to ensure that everything goes according to plan, and when things don't go as expected, we experience stress, anxiety, and frustration. Letting go of control, however, requires a shift in perspective, a surrender to something greater than ourselves. It is about releasing the need to control every outcome and trusting that God, in his wisdom and sovereignty, is working all things together for our good. One of the primary struggles we face in letting go of control is the fear of uncertainty. We often feel that if we aren't in control, things will spiral out of our hands and lead to chaos. But the reality is that the need for control often stems from a lack of trust. Trust in God, trust in his plans, and trust that he knows what is best for us. When we try to control everything, we place ourselves at the center, believing that we are the ones who must ensure everything turns out right. But God calls us to shift our focus from our own limited understanding to his boundless wisdom. He invites us to surrender our desires, our worries, and our plans, and to trust in his perfect will. Letting go of control is not about being passive or abandoning responsibility. It is about recognizing that there are things we cannot change, things that are beyond our power to manipulate, and releasing them into God's hands. It is a recognition that our own limited efforts cannot bring about the peace, healing, or solutions we seek, but that God is sovereign over every circumstance. In our desire to control, we often create more tension because we're trying to bend the world to our will rather than yielding to God's greater purpose. When we let go of control, we allow God to step in and work in ways that surpass our understanding. We stop striving in our own strength and allow his peace to take over. Letting go of control also requires us to relinquish the need for perfection. As we strive to manage every aspect of our lives, we may fall into the trap of perfectionism, thinking that every detail must be exactly right or everything will fall apart. This often leads to feelings of inadequacy, frustration, or exhaustion. But God's grace covers our imperfections. He doesn't require us to be perfect. He simply asks us to be obedient and faithful. When we let go of the pursuit of perfection, we free ourselves from unrealistic expectations and allow room for growth, mistakes, and grace. This freedom allows us to live in the peace that only comes from trusting in God's sufficiency rather than our own ability to control every outcome. In letting go of control, we also learn to trust God's timing. Often our desire to control is rooted in impatience or fear that things won't happen when we want them to. We try to rush God's process, wanting immediate answers or quick solutions. But God's timing is always perfect, and his ways are higher than our own. Letting go of control means trusting that God knows exactly when and how things need to unfold. It means allowing his timing to lead us, even when we don't understand it, and trusting that what he is doing in our lives is far better than what we could have orchestrated on our own. This surrender to God's control is also a recognition of his role as the ultimate provider and protector. When we let go of control, we acknowledge that we are not in charge of our destiny, but that God holds the future. We release our worries and anxieties about what will happen tomorrow because we trust that God is already there preparing the way for us. This doesn't mean we're inactive or complacent, but it means that we do not carry the burden of control on our own shoulders. Instead, we place our trust in God's hands, knowing that he is more than capable of guiding us, providing for us, and protecting us through every season of life. Letting go of control also opens us up to deeper relationships with others. When we hold on tightly to our need for control, we often push others away or create barriers in our relationships. We may try to manipulate situations, impose our will, or force others to conform to our expectations. But true intimacy in relationships requires vulnerability and trust. Letting go of control allows us to be more open and accepting of others. It allows us to recognize that we cannot control other people's actions, thoughts, or feelings, and that it is in God's hands to work in their hearts. It helps us to embrace others for who they are, not who we want them to be, and allows relationships to grow in authenticity and grace. In surrendering control, we also cultivate a deeper sense of peace and contentment. When we try to control everything, we become anxious, restless, and overwhelmed. We're constantly worrying about the future, second-guessing our decisions, and stressing over potential outcomes. But when we let go, we experience a peace that surpasses all understanding. We begin to live in the present, trusting that God has everything under control. We no longer feel the need to hold on so tightly because we understand that we are held securely in his hands. This peace frees us to experience life more fully, to be present with others, and to focus on what truly matters. Ultimately, letting go of control is a process of spiritual growth. It's about learning to trust God in every area of our lives, acknowledging that he is sovereign, wise, and loving. The more we surrender to his control, the more we grow in our faith, and the more we experience the abundant life he has for us. We move from a place of fear, anxiety, and striving to a place of peace, trust, and freedom. It is only in releasing control that we can truly experience the fullness of God's will for our lives, allowing him to work in ways that we could never have imagined or planned on our own. Letting go of control may be uncomfortable at first, but it is through this surrender that we find true freedom. When we let go of the burden of controlling every aspect of our lives, we open ourselves up to a life led by God's grace, guided by his wisdom and filled with his peace. In his hands, we are safe, we are provided for, and we can trust that everything is working together for our good.